So today I'm at one of Branson's most historical places, the home of Rose O'Neal, which she named Bonniebrook. It's way back in a holler back here, right north of Bear Creek. You can actually come here and tour the home, tour the art museum and the gift shop, and it's a really great place to get a little bit of education on Ozarks history. And maybe you're thinking about moving to the Ozarks. This might be a good place to start because Rose O'Neal documented so much of her life here, and her stories are very interesting about just nature in general, why she loved living here, because this was her favorite place on earth. So Rose O'Neal was very well spoken and educated, very well read. She was also a poet and a writer, other than being an artist. And so her mind was in creativity 24/7. She loved being creative and was always expressing herself through her artwork or her writing. So Rose was a very famous artist and was very wealthy for her time. She was most well known for her Cupid dolls, which she got the inspiration here to make the Cupid doll, and also a lot of her other art. She felt more inspired here than any other place that she owned, and she had some beautiful properties. One was in the Isle of Capri off of the coast of Naples, Italy. Another one was in Connecticut, and then she also had a home in New York. Now, I'm not an artist. I love art. I love going to the museums and looking at art. I really enjoy that, but I can't explain what her art means or what she was thinking. I've read a little bit about it recently for this video, and there's so much research about Rose O'Neal and so many of her writings about how she felt about her art and her surroundings, and everything that she looked at and cared about, she either wrote a story about it or she drew about it. And you'll see that in some of her artwork that I'll bring up in a minute. But I did find a really cool video that a girl, Christine, her channel, you need to go to her YouTube channel, is Beauty from Light. And she just did a mural in downtown Branson of Rose O'Neal and Bonniebrook, which is really beautiful and adds so much color. I just went down and took a look at it and really loved how it really gave the downtown area this pop of color that it needed. So another part of the story I wanted to share with you was my personal story about my grandparents. Her name was Callie McGrath, and she married Earl Keithley, and together they became caretakers of Bonniebrook for many years and took care of the O'Neal family. So I have quite a few stories about that and pictures I'm going to share with you too. So before that, that's kind of later in history. So I'll share a little bit about Rose's life so you can understand why she actually wanted to live in the Ozarks. So Rose's life started out in Pennsylvania in 1874, and she lovingly called her mom and dad Papa and Mimi, and she also had an older brother named Huey at the time. And they lived in this little house called the Emerald Cottage, which was about the same color as this color because Rose was inspired later on when she built Bonniebrook to do the same color on this house. So when you look at Rose's art, yeah, there's all kinds of kind of strange creatures and some of it, and things that you don't understand. But the way that she was taught, her mom and dad were both very well read and into Greek mythology, and taught her lots of things about books, and they read books all the time about myths. And also they were Irish, so her father told her stories about fairies and kings and queens and elves and all of the Irish folklore, which really influenced her life quite a bit. So they sounded like such a sweet family, and they really loved each other. They played music, and they were very into the arts. And her father loved to read Shakespeare out loud in his big Irish voice. So I thought that was a really cute story. But apparently there was money issues. And there was always money issues all throughout Rose's life as she was growing up. Her father was a book salesman. And everywhere that they moved to, they would carry stacks of books with them. And there's even a story of them moving to Nebraska and they had piles of books in the back of the wagon, and they would sleep back there with the books. And then every place that they moved into, they would use books as furniture, which I thought was kind of sweet. But they really had a hard time, especially when they moved to Nebraska. And they moved to this sod house made of prairie grass and dirt with a dirt floor, and it was extremely difficult. I guess he wanted to homestead and realized what a rough place Nebraska was, especially back in the 1880s. They even had to live through a flood and a blizzard in this house, and the fire went out and it was freezing cold and they were covered with snow. Anyway, it's quite a story. So some of these events kind of inspired her artwork later. So everything in her artwork is something that she had been through or experienced, and she kind of tied that into everything that she drew. So after living in the sod house out in the prairie, they decided to go to Omaha. And Omaha was a much bigger city, and it was an opportunity for her to experience different kinds of people, different races of people and colors. And she definitely expressed this in her artwork. And I love how she was such a positive influence for different kinds of people, and she portrayed them in such a lovely way. So as Rose was becoming a young lady, she got more and more talented with her art and got better and better with her drawing. And she was more interested in doing that than anything else. Now, her father wanted her to become an actress because she could act a little bit, and he wanted to train her a little bit more and really kind of push her out there and get her in theater and plays and kind of get her noticed, because she was a really beautiful girl too. They couldn't pay rent, it seemed like, was what I was reading in some cases, and so then they had to move again. So they moved a few times. So by this time, Rose was 13, and she won a drawing contest. And from there, her career just took off, and she got recognized because she won this prize. So winning that prize for that drawing really got her the confidence she needed and got her started and really got her recognized as a true artist. And then she was able to go to New York. Her first idea was to take her novel she had written and get it published, but they actually liked her drawings even better. And so when people discovered her drawings in New York, she got a job at Puck Magazine. She also drew pictures for Good Housekeeping and a few other magazines. Now she was working as a young lady in New York. She was the only female illustrator. And I can imagine that must have been really tough to work with only men around. And I read that they didn't even have a bathroom for her in the place that she worked. So I don't know what she did there, but it was very tough for a woman to make it and very unusual. So around this time, her father got tired of the city life in Omaha, and he wanted to be in an area that was more reclusive. So as Rose was working faster and drawing more and being able to produce more, she really made a lot of money. So she would send that money back to her family, because deep down she really just wanted to take care of her family. And she was really known for being such a generous and kind person that throughout her life she gave a lot of her money away. So this is when Papa discovered the Ozark Mountains, and he homesteaded this place where I'm at right now. It had an old cabin on it, and they lived in that cabin for a while with their stacks of books. And then Rose came to visit. And this is a pretty cool story, because this is the first time that Rose O'Neill came to the Ozarks. So her family picked her up in Springfield and got a driver for a wagon that drove them from Springfield all the way down to Bonniebrook, which took a day and a half, I believe, because they had to spend the night somewhere. And she talked about how the ride was long and her corset was pinching her, and she probably just couldn't wait to get that corset off, and I don't think she ever wore one again. And this was her first time seeing the Ozarks, and what she noticed was the rocks and the twists and turns in the tree trunks, and she lovingly called it the tangles. This gave her a lot of inspiration for the creatures that she drew in her drawings and some of her sculptures that you can see on the property. So you can see why Rose O'Neill called the Ozarks a place to unbutton, because she probably had to wear a corset all the time and work in the city. She finally had a place where she could relax, and by relaxing, she could be more creative, and I think that's really why she loved it here. Now, in time, the O'Neills got to meet their neighbors, the McGrath family, which bordered Bonniebrook just north of here. So the McGraths were a salt-of-the-earth family. They were very hardy and hardworking, and there was 5 boys and 1 girl. And that 1 girl was my grandma. So you can believe it that she learned how to cook at a really young age, and that was what she was pretty much known for, is cooking for everyone. And in time, she got to meet the O'Neills, and she was such a hard worker and a good cook that Rose wanted to hire her, and she stayed on for many years. Now, I know you must be wondering, how in the world can you have a grandmother that old? Okay, so I'm going to tell you. We have a huge generation gap in our family, because Callie didn't have my dad until she was 39. And then when I was born, my dad was 30. I knew her through the 80s when I was growing up. And when she died in 91, she would have been 86. I was 17. So all those years, I got to grow up with Callie, and I spent a lot of time with her, sometimes every day or every other day. And she would just be so welcoming and just want to have me over, and we would either bake, we would make something to drink like lemonade, she would play her mandolin a little bit, and then we'd get out old pictures. And a lot of the stuff that I played with was Rose O'Neil stuff. I read Rose O'Neil's letters and postcards that she wrote to Callie, and while they traveled, even played dress up in some of Rose's stuff, like her fur fox stole, and looked at pictures, and then she would tell me all kinds of stories about all the pictures. And there was, like, I'm telling you, like, suitcases full, because anyone that lived through the Great Depression, they never threw away anything. So we had lots of stuff to look at, but I loved it, and I just spent hours asking her questions, and she would tell me stories. Another thing that my grandma did about Bonniebrook, she wrote this cookbook, and it has a lot of her old recipes in it that she would make for Rose O'Neil. And I still use this cookbook to this day, especially her cornbread. Now, my grandfather also helped out quite a bit, and he would run errands and take Rose to the movies. And he also chopped a lot of wood, because they needed wood for the fire to cook on. Yeah, that's right. They had a wood stove back then. There was no electricity until later in the 30s here. So they had a lot of work to do, and it was probably a constant thing for my grandparents to feed and take care of the O'Neills. In her cookbook here, it says, during the period Callie May lived at Bonniebrook, they had a Guernsey cow and a few chickens. They churned the cream into butter and had plenty of rich milk. So they had eggs, they had milk, they had butter, and then my grandfather was a really good hunter, and he would go to Colorado and get deer and elk and bring it back. And then he would hunt, for deer and other animals here too, and that's what they lived on. So they had their meat and their dairy, and whatever vegetables were in the garden, that's what they ate. So I recently got to go through the house again, and a lot of the stuff that we had after my grandmother died, we just donated to the Historical Society here at Bonniebrook. So a lot of the original pieces Rose gave to my grandma, because they were running out of money as the Great Depression dragged on. So you can see many of the pieces that she had in the original house, because this is actually just a replica. The original house burned in 1947, but the Historical Society rebuilt it and then furnished it. So we had donated back the bed upstairs in Rose's room, and then the red couch in the living room. Items like the apple peeler that we used all the time. And what else? Oh, this blue iron. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's wasps. And looking through this cookbook again, my grandmother said that Rose rarely got up early. So they would have breakfast that was all day, and then no lunch, and then dinner. So my grandmother was cooking a lot. And for a lot of people, it seems like she never complained about Rose O'Neill, not one bit. Actually, she was very proud that she got to do this job for the O'Neills and take care of them. And she actually loved them. And they loved her as well, which I'm going to put a little quote in here. And I wish I had it to read to you, but I left the book at home. Her mother, Mimi, gave this really little sweet and kind of funny quote about my grandma and how she was. When Grandma would feed her, she would have to walk up the steps, up those winding steps to Rose's studio, because Rose wanted her breakfast when she woke up and sometimes a snack. And then she might holler down to Callie and say, "Hey, Callie, can you bring me a snack?" Because she would stay up in that studio all day sometimes because she really wanted to focus on her artwork. So she really did need someone to cook for her and take care of her. And she really loved hosting big parties for the local people and also for family and friends that would come from other places like New York, especially artists or musicians would come and stay with her. And the O'Neills really loved country music. So a lot of the local people would play and they'd have square dances. And I imagine it was just a really cool time to be here. So definitely Rose was way ahead of her time. She even had this bohemian look to her, kind of unkept hair. And there's stories that the local people would talk about when they would see her walking down the street. She was very noticeable because she looked so different than everybody else. But obviously she felt comfortable here just to be herself. So I think that's another reason why Rose loved the Ozarks. She felt like she could just be herself and be the artist that she wanted to be. Remember, you can also contact the Historical Society about books on Rose O'Neill. And this book is where I got most of the information for my video. So give them a call. They can give you a great deal on this book. Don't buy it on Amazon. And I'll leave all of the information that you can contact if you want more info about Bonniebrook. And if you'd like more info about moving here, feel free to give me a call. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.